Hey guys, welcome to a first banger of a video. Today we're going to be doing a breakdown of the audio and video effects and production methods used for Empire State of Mind. There's actually a surprising amount of stuff going on in this video. It's going to be broken into three parts. The first part will be pre-production, then we'll have the audio portion, and then the video portion, as that's the order I did them. So to get us started here, let's go ahead and work on our pre-production. So a surprising amount goes into pre-production. There's arranging music or acquiring music arrangement. There is planning out your shots. There's having a recording schedule so you know when you're going to be done. And there's planning out your angles on the camera. There's planning out what parts you're going to use and what parts you're going to have more than one of. A surprising amount has to take place before you can even pick up your instrument and start playing. Okay, so here we have the MuseScore file. To make this a little more easy to view, I'm going to go into continuous view. MuseScore is absolutely wonderful. I've been using this for around 3 or 4 years now. It has never let me down. If there's something that I want to accomplish in MuseScore, there is a way to accomplish it. All it is a quick internet search away. So there's a couple parts here that I really didn't program in. The biggest of them being the drum set. The only reason that I have this in here at all is to get a feel for the groove, but the drums were essentially improvised. This is because the rhythm there really suits it best if I'm not reading directly from a page and I'm actually just feeling the rhythm of the song and playing along with it. The other part that's not exactly identical to the recording is the shaker part. I have a couple areas here where it drops out, and that was an original idea to make it a little bit more like the song. I didn't end up doing that. The shaker part was recorded live with a real shaker. Everything except for pianos, the square synthesizer, electric bass. There is another bass that's not notated in here. They were all recorded using MIDI, and MIDI is something that I cannot recommend enough. For those of you who don't know what MIDI is, what it lets you do is that you can play something on your electronic instrument, which is plugged into your computer, and it will transmit various data about that note that you're playing or notes that you're playing, and put them into whatever audio workstation you're using. So MIDI helped me out a lot here because I didn't have to do everything in one take, because there's a lot of modification that I can do. And say, you flip a note or something on the piano. This makes it a lot easier to fix that. Instead of redoing your take, then you can just flip it. So, to break this down a little bit, there's a couple different sections. I use these little letter markers right here, if you can see, to notate where certain big points in the music are. I do this before I even start anything. I just count out the measures and figure out where they are. So our first one is A, and that's the beginning. I leave one measure before everything starts to get the recording time to go. So I can hit record, 2, 3, 4, go. And that gives me a decent amount of time. Part A here, this is a little intro part. This is where the pictures are going. It's a 2-bar phrase that's repeated. The first ending is just a bridge into there, and the second ending includes a piano riff that is basically bringing us into the main melody of the song. B is where it plays the little piano riffs for a couple measures. And then at C, we have the trumpet solo come in. And the trumpet solo is, again, not exactly played as written. It's a little more staccato that I played it. To compensate for that, I added just a little more reverb to make the piece sound a little bit less dry. Towards the end of this, actually, the second trumpet comes in and brings us to a harmony. Second trumpet leads us through this little, suspenseful chord phrase here, where we've got these staccato eighth notes. We've got a little hi-hat riff right here, and a snare double click there. Electric bass here, this was a kind of an afterthought. We added it in because the there's an electric bass in the actual song with a lot of drive on it. So I wanted one of those. This electric bass does not have a lot of drive on it, but the one in Logic has a little more. In addition to this, there's section D here. This is the main chorus. Notice how I've really only divided the chords up into little triads. This rhythm I didn't use. I wanted a more constant rhythm, so I used just whole notes. And these parts here were duplicated many, many times. I'll show you once we get to the audio portion of this video. There are maybe 20 different versions of them. I didn't count. I just did a lot until they sound good. The baritone horn, there's also a lot of these. There's some that are pitched an octave down to give it more foundation. And the drum set part is not written in because that was also improvised and I did not need that for this particular section of the music. I believe that just about breaks down the music score portion of this, except for cymbals, which were not shown in the video, but I played the marching cymbals in order to give it a little bit more zing, which I really think kind of worked out. That brings us to the audio portion. While this is loading up, I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of insight into my process for this. So my process for the past couple videos has been very different from this one. It's been that I arrange the music in MuseScore, print it out, learn it, then I will record video and audio together. Now that's great, but that means your video has to be pretty bland because you're going to have to do a lot of different, you're going to have to do a lot of takes before you can get one that you're happy with. And that takes more time on the video end. I'd much rather take more time on the audio end since it's a lot easier to reset in a program like Logic and do another take. So instead of recording video and audio at the same time, what I do this time for almost all of these tracks, except for the drums, I did those live on the overhead cam because I didn't want there to be any discrepancies. All of them are, I did them all in a separate room in a separate time before the video. Some of them after, but we'll get to that. So, first thing you might notice about this project, there are a lot of tracks. We're not going to count stereo out, so there's 49 tracks. And that's a lot to deal with, actually. I've grouped a couple of them into here. We've got cymbals, that's just 2 cymbals. Another thing you might notice is a lot of these are mono. A lot of the ones that I recorded are mono. The reason I do that is because sometimes I move around when I'm playing the trumpet. And if I'm moving from side to side, this will also be a mono, so that won't really do anything. But if I'm moving from side to side, then you can kind of hear, it's moving from my ear to my other ear, and he's not doing that in the video, and that looks really weird. So I make them mono for the most part. Cymbals were not because I was staying pretty still. I've also got baritones here. There's a lot of them. The pitch correction plugin. Let me say a little bit something about this. Pitch correction, if used in moderation, can help your track out a lot, specifically if you're using brass. With the vocals, it's a lot more easy to pick up on, but in brass, it's not. And what it does is those tiny, minute parts where you're a little bit off, it picks them up and brings them right to where they need to be. And that really aligns your piece musically. So I don't advocate for the use of auto-tune or pitch correction all the time, but in certain cases, it can actually really help your piece. For the most part, though, I do tune before I play. I play in tune pretty much the whole time, but there's slight little parts where it's not quite right. As far as the trumpet chords, you'll notice that there are a lot of these. Even though there are only 4 parts here, these are not part of them. It stops at this track. But even though that there are only 4 parts, I recorded a ton of them. This is one of the things that I've kind of learned on my own. I've kind of picked it up, not from tutorials. There's really not a ton of tutorials on mixing brass, specifically your own brass, not another band's brass. But what's really, really helpful is if you need more, just like drive behind your recording. I mean, just add more brass. So that doesn't mean make it louder, because making it louder will just accentuate more of the bad. If you add more parts, it sounds more robust. And this is something I can't quite explain in logical terms, but it works. There's a bunch of other little nuances when you're recording brass, especially high brass. Low brass is a lot easier to record because there's just a wider range of frequencies, and you don't really need to worry about trying to chop off some of the high end in your actual recording. You can always do that in EQ too. But yeah, so let's go down the line here. So our first one here, we've got a piano part 1. This is this one here. You'll notice it's looped, and this is because, well, I don't really have the time to be recording a full 16 measure or 32 measure phrase if I can just record one and it still sounds just fine. So that's exactly what I did. For most of these here, little rhythm issues I've corrected. All you have to do is select them all and hit the quantize button right here, the little Q. Absolutely saved my life once I realized I could do that like last year. Piano part 2. So this is just up until around measure D. So this is for the first real section, I guess, of the song. Piano part 2 logically would be, this is right before D. So I guess this is the little in-betweener. And this one here has octaves building. So it starts with 1 here, and then 2, and then 3. And you can kind of see that layout on here. Piano 2 treble clef. So this has a couple parts in it. First, we've got our little intro. Both of these have an intro. The reason I did that was so that I could loop this one, just like I did with the first one. I'll go over some of the effects that are used on these. Not all of them are... I didn't apply all of them. In fact, I didn't apply any effects on these pianos here. Except for this one. I don't know why. I think it just might need more plink. These are all basically just installed when you click on whichever piano you're going to be using. So the piano parts are pretty straightforward. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. This here is the progressive rock bass, I guess. And it's got a little bit of drive behind it. I'll play it for you. It's not like super drivey like in the actual song, but it's got the bass foundation that the song needs. So it's not going to play through the microphone. Well, never mind. Okay, cool. So next up we've got our heavy bass, and these again, I did not apply those effects. Right here, this is our heavy bass, and this is actually a synth bass, and it is playing constant tones through the whole ending portion of here, going like down a fifth at the last note, the last eighth note there, and that really just provides a little bit more foundation to the whole end portion of this. It was kind of a I wonder what will happen if kind of moment. This here, I have 2 sets of these drums because I recorded them in separate takes. But I recorded this all in one take, put a little bit of quantization on it just to make it line up a tiny more. I know it's kind of cheating, but I mean, my goal here is to make a good project and not right now to be a professional drummer. So that's the first portion here. That includes part of a fill as well. And then the second one, which is pretty much identical, except it's a little louder because it's just a little more energetic. Everything's a little louder. It's just the second portion of it, and it's got the open hi-hat and everything for a more loose feel. The shaker up next. So this was the first live track that I recorded, not electronic. And the shaker here was actually pretty straightforward. It's really just 16th notes, and there's a little trick for this. You go cacophony, 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 and that's kind of the rhythm I went for. So, and that worked pretty well. And then there's a little breakout right here where we've got our little drum thing, and then pop. So, and you can really see how this rhythm works out here. Next up, cymbals. So the cymbals here were, when I was arranging, kind of an afterthought. Is like, well, this piece here could really benefit from cymbals, and I have a pair in the house, and I might as well use them. Keep the old cymbal muscle in my brain working. So I divided it into two parts so that I could do a at about that tempo, because that's decently hard to do with cymbals if you're doing a big orchestra crash, if you're trying to do it on one pair. So that's that. Those are one of the few tracks that I left in stereo that I recorded myself. You can see here, all I had to do to switch them to mono would be to click this little stereo symbol right here. Next up is baritones. So there's a couple of these while I was essentially remixing the entire project that I realized, oh wow, these are like pretty bad. So those ones I got rid of, and you can see here, and a couple of them were even like on a second take. But my goal here was, I guess while I was recording, was more quantity than quality. I've also split the rhythm up into a couple other things. We've got big notes there, and then we've also got whole notes here that you can kind of see. And then it all breaks out at letter D. So that's the baritones essentially. As far as chords here, there's how many of these did I do? Yeah, I did about 5 of each part to make it just balanced and to have a little more volume behind it. So that was the goal with these. They worked out pretty well. I ended up turning them fairly far down in the end mix here. Reason for that is that I had everything cranked up way too loud, and you couldn't hear. Well, everything was peaking all the time. If you notice right here, little tip for you. This is the peak display here. So what this will do is essentially, if your audio is too loud or if it's overloading, then it will turn red and show you how much by how much it's overloading. Right now it's at negative 19.2, and that's pretty good. That gives a lot of headroom, but it updates as you play. So when I play, then it'll turn more like to -4 or so. Before that, it was around like overloading at 12, so positive 12. So yeah. After the chords here, we've got trumpet 1. We've got 2 of them. And the first one here is take 7, because I did a couple different days, and really in the low register on trumpet I was just having some difficulty, to be honest. So I ended up saying, you know what, this will work, and it kind of did. So this is the original beginning solo part, and I split it up into 2 so that I could get in the right headspace to this one, a little amp up, get ready. And I gotta say, this one here, it's kind of a miracle I got that good of a take on take 3, because I really had not been able to even go from like an E to a G or a G to an E on trumpet until that day. So it's really kind of a miracle. Trumpet 2, again, the main purpose of this, I don't actually know if I said this earlier, but the main purpose of trumpet 2 is to be the backup for trumpet 1, so providing little harmonies in like thirds, and then trumpet 3, 4, and 5 all build the triad chord. So that's the purpose of that. Trumpet 2, I added in a little bit of harmony on the second one. It was already on the fourth one, but I added on the second one to make it feel a little less lonely. And then here it's got a little lead in to letter D and a little counter melody on this particular riff, and that really brings us to the end here. There was a MuseScore track in there as well that I used. I always use a MuseScore track. This is a fantastic idea. I highly recommend you do it. First thing is set a tempo in your MuseScore track, like in the project of MuseScore. Set that tempo up here. Set your time signatures and everything. And then what you need to do is make sure that your MuseScore doesn't have a metronome on. I mean, it won't hurt you if it does. And then you can play in time and in tune and in the right rhythm, right? So if you have those parts already there and you don't have to record them, then you know what you're striving for. And that really, really has helped me in all of these projects. That's, again, just one of the things I've like discovered on my own. No one taught me that. So there's not a ton of material out there on this kind of stuff. And really, like, I don't know how much demand there is for this, but like I want to provide whatever knowledge I can for those who are like me and wanting to make this kind of content. So next up, we're going to go ahead and not save because there's nothing I need to save in there. We're going to go over the video. So I keep everything pretty organized on my, on here. I have not been using this computer that I'm recording on for the actual, video editing typically, because it's an older machine. It's around 5 or 6 years old now. And, I mean, it hasn't bit the dust yet, but it's not exactly awesome at running Final Cut Pro, especially on the project Pomp and Circumstance. That one, I had divided it up into a total of 160-something video clips, and that was really a pain. So this particular library, by the way, if you're curious, is like 270 gigs. I offloaded it from the other computer on last night. So the first one here, this is camera angle 1. So all of these shots I planned out. This one I never used because in all of them here, if you actually look at it, their backs are facing you, and that's just kind of uninviting, and like it's not a look into it, it's a look of it, and it really I don't like that. So I ended up scrapping this part here, but what I did was compose the individual camera angles first. The editing is pretty interesting on how it works. So essentially what I do for that is you create a drawn out mask here. You can find those in this little button, masks, and right here. And that will allow you to draw a mask on there. And I put a little bit of feathering on them, and I try to match the background so that because sometimes there's little lighting problems. I recorded this all pretty close of each other. But you never know. So, yeah, and I was originally going to have another piano part here, and I think it didn't record, or maybe I gave up on it before. No, it didn't record. Yeah. So I never ended up using that angle, which made it a little more bland, but that's okay. So then I did camera angle 2, and this one is one I used a lot because this one is the view of everyone. So each of these parts, as you can see as I'm scrubbing through these, were recorded just individually in the separate spots. Piano is recorded here. Baritone over here, trumpet 1 over here, and trumpet 2 I moved way too far over to the left because the drummer is right next to him. So you can see in a lot of these shots, oops, oh, that's the wrong project. This is the project we're on. You can see in a lot of these shots here that there's a little bit of overlap and feathering between here and here, like especially here. You can see the shirt's kind of getting cut off. I had to really cut it close. The baritone and the chair, though, that actually worked out pretty well because I didn't move that chair at all when I was recording or after I'd recorded that piano part, which really made my life easier. I just had to crop out right around it. So this technique, I've seen a bunch of other people use it, like EMC Productions. He doesn't have to do quite as complicated of a shape here for these because I mean, he records in just like a straight line. I'm recording in a room with a fisheye lens. But I highly recommend you check out some of his content. It's really inspiring and really cool. He does a lot of drum stuff, and he's been in drum corps and all that. So really cool. then we'll go to our other angles. So this one here has a couple of projects in it. The first one is pretty simple. It's got one clip, and it's a little double snare shot. This just has the ch-ch right before letter D. The next shot we have is a overhead piano. So I have only a couple different angles here, but they're enough to give it a little bit of quality compared to my other ones, my other videos, which really only have one camera angle for like all the parts, which is a little boring if you ask me. So this one here is just one of the piano parts, me playing it on the keyboard. I have one of the side for the higher parts, the plink plink plink, and just where that is focused in on that. For all these shots, I used a GoPro. The overhead parts were the hardest to set up. I'll kind of explain my little setup there. I have a picture of how I set it up. Yeah, I'll put that on screen right now. And that is the little thing that the GoPro is attached to. It's got a clip that's meant for a hat, and that clip is attached to a shock mount for an old microphone that I have, and that whole contraption is on the microphone stand. So it's really not a great solution for it, but it's what it is. Then we have here our drums part 2. This is overhead shot. This is the same contraption I use for the piano and drums. And then we have drums part 1, and that's the same thing, but right here. And this was not cropped out. I cropped it later. Then we can go to the actual main project. So essentially the way that I did this, and this worked out pretty well here, is I laid out all the clips on top of each other. This does not have the pictures in them. That's in a separate project. I'll get to that. But I basically muted these tracks where they're not supposed to be playing and unmuted them where they are. And so this is the process I use for it, and I tried to make the clicks all on like a snare or the beginning of a measure or some sort of notable thing, so it's not just a random cut. I didn't really follow any particular rhyme or reason or pattern here. It was just what it is. So yeah, that's really all there was to it. As far as putting in the pictures, it's in a different library here. This one I did on this machine locally. This might totally break my computer. If I lose this recording, I'm going to be very upset. So this is Pomp and Circumstance. That's not what we're looking for. Empire. I think this is it. Yeah. So the process I use for these, I might go into these here, but what this is a compound clip. And these are essentially, this one has 6, this one has 5, and this one has 5 clips all grouped together into just one to make it a little more simple. The process I use for this, I made them all the same amount of length. I believe that's 1 second and 29 frames. I went 29 frames into the actual thing, added a keyframe for their final size, which you can do up in here. And so that way they kind of zoom up into there. I'll play it in slow motion here. So they kind of get thrown up on the screen. By 29 frames, they're all the way there. And then there is a 3-second fade in, fade out on either side of the clip. The pictures here were taken by me and my sister, who helped with color correction on them as well. Thank you. And really, I think they turned out great. They're just various things around Chapel Hill and Carborough that give you a Carolina kind of mindset, which is really cool. And then this is the exported project from the other one. I didn't use this audio in the end because this was before I had recorded my trumpet solo. That one is in here. And as you can see, there's many iterations of my audio. This one was the final one. And it's right in here. And that was the final version of that. Um, yeah. So that's the video. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions about how I did other projects or stuff or anything, I'm probably gonna do this type of thing as I go for the up and coming ones. I don't have an idea of what my next one will be, but we'll see. This one kind of just came to me. Um, but if you want to see more behind the scenes content like this and breakdowns, I don't know how many people are gonna actually find this interesting. Probably not many because it's not exactly the most generally appealing topic, but I feel like this is some information that should be out there. You know how to do this stuff on in the software that I'm using and the recording techniques that you're gonna need. Um, well, yeah. One final thing: the way that I set up these shots here, I'll have it on screen right now. I put a tripod in each corner with a GoPro mount on it. Had them angled a specific way that I would be able to replicate. I kept them there. I did the recording start and stop from my phone. You can actually see it in a couple of the shots, but that way the GoPro would not move in between shots. If it moves in between shots, you have to redo everything. So really not a fun time. But it was a pretty smooth process, really, from start to finish. I gotta say, this is one of the quickest times I've got this amount of work done. I started this project sometime last week. I recorded stuff in about 3 days and put it together in 2 days. So seems like a long time, but that's pretty quick. Thank you guys for watching. If you got any feedback or any questions you have about how I did certain things on this project or any others, I'd love to answer them. All my projects have had their learning experiences and little tidbits that are kind of hard to work around. Specifically, like Pomp and Circumstance, that one was an absolute nightmare to put together, specifically in the post-production phase. That was just a lot of work. But yeah, let me know if this is the kind of content that you guys might want to see. Thanks. Bye.